Hola, ¿qué tal amigos? Bienvenidos a Imago Day. Es un placer volver a estar aquí con ustedes compartiendo otra entrevista más después de haber estado un tiempo un poco desaparecido. Pero gracias a Dios estamos aquí nuevamente trayendo más contenido aquí al canal. Bueno, en esta oportunidad me acompaña una amiga, una excelente amiga. Ella es Xandra Carroll. Uh, Thank you so much for being here, Xandra. Welcome to my channel.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, and it has been a long time since we have seen each other.
I know, I miss Peru. Oh, I need
Yeah,
to get back there soon.
and I hope to see you again soon. It will be amazing to see you in person.
I hope
So,
one day.
so Sandra, you're a biologist, right? You're familiar with science. Why don't you introduce yourself to those who don't know you or don't know what you do?
Okay. So I did a master's degree in biology, and my focus was in conservation, in ecological restoration. So basically taking an ecosystem that is degraded or damaged or destroyed and trying to bring it back to life or trying to make it thrive, make it healthy again. And so this happens on an ecological level. It's not just putting plants in the ground. It looks like sometimes translocating species into that area, taking them from one place and putting them in the forest that you're trying to heal, basically. And so my focus was on birds, and I did my research in New Zealand, on the Northern Island of New Zealand. So that's my master's degree. But I've also dabbled in a lot of other research because I love science. So I've done some cell biology, work with human blood cells, and yeah, and then also dabbled a little bit in paleontology, which is really fun. I don't have a degree in paleontology, but I've been on a couple dinosaur digs and written some articles on that. So yeah.
Awesome. Thanks again for being here, for agreeing to this interview. And before we talk, about the topic, the questions that I prepared for this interview, why don't you tell us about your testimony? How did you become a Christian?
Yeah. So I was raised by parents who had come to faith much later in life. They both discovered God in university. And so they were really excited about their faith, when we were little, and excited about teaching us to pray and read the Bible. So from a young age, I had sort of an understanding of God. But then as I got older, I did drift away from the Lord. Actually, I walked away from him. Well, I ran away from him. So I still believed that God existed, but I did not want him because I wanted to live life my way. And so I rejected him. And I would have been about 20 at this time, I think 20, 21. And that was a really hard time in my life. So, but through a really interesting series of events, he brought me back to himself. But part of the reason why I walked away from him, I think, was also because of fear. I was the only person who claimed to be Christian in my whole cohort of biologists. And there was some animosity. There was like some anger there. Sometimes people were not kind to me because of my belief in God. And that's also maybe part of why I started to hide my faith. I was really ashamed that I believed in God because I was told that that was silly, that meant that I was not intelligent, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I since coming back to the Lord, I think my faith has been way stronger, and I've been way more passionate about defending the faith, because now I see more clearly why it is rational and true. So yeah, a lot of what I do is just encouraging young people, like yourself or others who might be struggling with the same questions that I struggled with when I was in my early 20s.
Thank you for sharing your testimony. It's encouraging to many people who are watching this program. Thank you very much for that. So why don't we talk or start talking about the creation controversy? This is a big controversy in the Christian world. From your experience as a scientist, as a biologist, how would you respond to people who are Christians and who don't have confidence in science to defend creation?
Yeah, well, that's a good point that you bring up, because a lot of people look at this controversy, as you say, from only one side. They say, like, the scientists don't like belief in God, right? And then the Christians don't like science. But actually, this is such, oftentimes I think it's just a totally false dilemma, because I have met so many incredible scientists who have a beautiful faith in God, who believe in Him, and they have a deep, rich faith. They've been walking with Him for years, for decades. And that their belief in God has only served to enrich their science, right? It has helped them to do better research, they say. Actually, in the olden days, a lot of the forefathers of sciences, like the father of microbiology, the father of electromagnetics, et cetera, they did science because they believed in God, right? Because they believed that the natural order had been designed and created with intelligible purpose. And so they decided, we can go out and do these experiments that you can repeat. We can do research that builds on research we've already done. We can find patterns. And all of this was because there was a sort of a logic built into the natural world, right? A sort of a design, if you will. So that's kind of part of why a lot of people in the olden days did science and fell in love with the scientific process. So nowadays, it's a little bit of a different tune. Sometimes people will say, if you want to be serious about science, if you want to be a real scientist, you need to be secular. You can't have any kind of faith, because that will negatively affect your ability to do science. And this rhetoric is just as untrue now as it was before. There are so many brilliant scientists today who believe in God. And not only that, the amazing thing is we see so many cases of people who did not believe in God, but they were conducting science, right? And then through their research, through their life, eventually they discovered God, right? And some of these people will say that they found God because of their science, right? That all of these discoveries of the natural world and natural processes pointed them back to the person who made all of these things, pointed them back to God. And I find that really interesting and really encouraging as well. And there are brilliant scientists on both sides, I want to say. I have so many atheist friends who are absolutely brilliant. And I have so many Christian friends who are absolutely brilliant scientists as well. So it doesn't mean you're smarter or not as smart, depending on your religious belief.
It's true. There are many people who confuse those terms, science, creationism, and think that they are incompatible. Now, I know that within the Christian world, there are several interpretations about it, and none of them make you a better or worse Christian. The point is that there are some atheists who say that if you are a Christian, you can't believe in the theory of evolution. And there are Christians who say that if you're a Christian, you can embrace the theory of evolution. So, how would you respond to those people?
Yeah, so this gets a bit more into the philosophical side of this discussion, right? So we're still talking about science, but it's important to pay attention to the fact that we've sort of stepped over the threshold into a bit more of a philosophical discussion. So I think I appreciate what you said, Andres, because there are so many different types of theistic evolution. Oh, and when I say theistic evolution, that means that's referring to the belief that God created the world and everything that we see through an evolutionary process. So it's the belief that God used evolution sort of like his paintbrush, right? It was his tool when he was creating. the masterpiece that we see around us. Now, a naturalistic view of evolution would say that it's an unguided natural process, and there's nothing supernatural about it, right? So this is just the basically the product of time plus matter plus chance, as Francis Schaeffer so eloquently said. Now, when we get more into the belief of God alongside of evolution, you can have more of a deistic framework, and this belief would say that God created the process of evolution, okay? He created the macroevolutionary process, almost like a force, like he created gravity or he created, whatever. And then he kind of let it go. So he created the process of evolution, but then that process sort of took over and the time plus matter plus chance happened. So there's still an element of it's not guided, right? But then there's another form which would say, no, that God used evolution. He was present in evolution to create. So he was sort of directing evolution to have specific outcomes, human beings probably being certainly a significant outcome. And so all of these would have different interpretations of Genesis and different views of the intersection between evolution as a guided process or as a purely natural process. Yeah.
So it's possible, to be a theistic evolutionist, and it doesn't mean that you are less Christian. It's simply the interpretation that you have of the data.
Right. And I've met many, many Christians who are theistic evolutionists who have such a strong faith, and I respect them so much, and I've learned so much from them. My research has pointed me in a different direction. So, I certainly don't agree with most of the tenets of theistic evolution, but I have a lot of friends who do, and they're incredible, wonderful people, and I respect them very much. So if you're out there and you're watching this video and you're thinking, okay, I'm a Christian, I believe in God, but I think that, macroevolution is like a real thing. What does this mean for me? Don't freak out. Don't worry. There are lots of people like you out there, and you can still have a rich, deep faith in God. It's not a salvific issue. And what I mean by that term is it's not a primary issue that determines whether or not you actually belong to God, right? If you were to come to me, Andres, and say, I think I might believe in macroevolution, I'd be like, cool, that's great. Let's talk about it, right? That doesn't determine whether or not you have a belief in God or an active faith in God. But if you come to me and you say, I don't think Jesus was actually God, then we have a problem, right? We have a serious problem, because that is a salvific issue. That's a primary issue within the Christian paradigm. It's good to talk about these things, but it also, it's important to kind of take the pressure off and say, well, we can talk about baptism. Do you sprinkle people or do you dunk people? That's not a salvific issue. We can talk about the age of the earth. That's not a salvific issue. We can talk about dinosaurs. Did they exist? Did they not exist? Not a salvific issue. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what C.S. Lewis called mere Christianity, right?
Yeah, good book.
You read my mind, because I wanted to ask you about some people who are watching this interview, and they are Christians. Many people have grown up in a Christian family and then started a scientific career, thinking afterwards that there is a contradiction between science and the Bible, and they are struggling with their faith. So, as you said, these people are not alone. There are so many good Christians who are on that side, that is theistic evolution.
Yeah.
Now, a new topic related to science is that some atheists, there are many videos of this on YouTube, is that when they say when you study more science, when you study the scientific process, you're going to reject the idea of God. In other words, when you study more about science, the idea of God will diminish. I don't know if you've heard of that idea. So, what do you think about this? Will science eliminate the need for God or this idea of God?
Mm, yeah, wow, good point. So as you're speaking, I'm actually remembering a quote from Werner Heisenberg, and he said that the first sip from the glass of natural sciences will turn you into an atheist, but at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you. And I really like this quote because oftentimes, people approach science as if it's an alternative to God, as if, well, we don't need God anymore because we have science. But the deeper into science you get and the more you understand what science is, you realize it can't substitute God, because that's like a categorical error, right? And John Lennox says it this way: it's kind of like me saying, well, I don't have to believe in Ford, the existence of Ford, because we have the Model T, like we have the Model T car here. So, we don't need him because this exists. Well, you still haven't explained agency, right? It's a question of agency. And science is kind of like a car. It's kind of like a tool that God has given us. He created it so that we could get in there and drive around and make all sorts of discoveries. And so it doesn't negate him at all. It doesn't delete his existence. But if you get deep enough into science, I think it does point you back to him. The very fact that we can do science is incredible. I mean, it's interesting to me that so many people get into science and they're like, I don't have to believe in God anymore because, I have science, and like science is my God kind of a thing. I believe in reality. And that's so fascinating to me, because if we could just dive into the philosophy pool again one more time and swim around for a minute. Think about that statement, right? I believe in reason. Well, why? Why do you believe in reason? Why would you trust your reason? There's no reason to trust your reason unless it is God-given, right? And so many scientists, including Albert Einstein, were amazed at the fact that the universe is intelligible, that we can look into the universe and comprehend what we see. There's no reason why we should be able to look at the stars. There's no reason why we should, and map the constellations and figure out patterns and sit down and do mathematics and, algebra, and whatever way you like to nerd out is awesome. But it's all incredible, and it's all based on human reason, which is in and of itself totally unnatural. There's no reason why we should have reason. So anyway, I could go down that little rabbit trail or rabbit hole, but I think I will actually stop myself from too severe a digression. But you get the point, right? It's all a gift from God. And the ancients said that. They used to say, Deus scientiarum dominus, which in Latin translates to God is Lord of the sciences. He's Lord of the sciences. He's King of the sciences. And he gives it to his children as a precious gift. So yeah, anyway, non-overlapping magisteria, categorical error. That's my answer to that.
Yes, there are people who say that science is atheist. However, science has no religion. It's not atheist, it's not Christian, it's not Jewish, it's just science.
Right. It's not in and of itself a religion, right? Although people have tried to make religion out of science, like scientism, right? There's an example. So scientism is a philosophical belief that science can answer every question, and that if science can't answer a question, you just throw it away. So it's almost like a religion. It's very dogmatic to say if science can't prove it, throw it away. But if you apply that statement to itself, right, you know where I'm going with this, reductio ad absurdum argument here. But if you apply it to itself, you have to throw that away, because science can't explain scientism. So if you have to throw away anything that science can't explain, you throw that whole philosophy away anyway. So yeah, it doesn't work. If you try to make it into a religion, if you try to make it into any kind of ideology, yeah, it's a tool. It's a tool. It can be used for good or evil, but it's not a good way to operate philosophically or morally.
Thank you for your answer. So now moving to another topic, there is a big question about animal suffering. How can we reconcile the problem of animal suffering? There are many people who mention that Christians or Christianity only focuses on human pain and not in animal suffering. What will be your answer to that?
Yeah, I think, when I read the Bible, I read about a God who cares so much about animals, cares very deeply about animals. In fact, there's a passage in Matthew chapter 5, Matthew chapter 6, sorry, where Jesus explains that even the sparrows are very precious to him, right? And he sees every sparrow on the earth. And sparrows are considered as like these tiny little birds that people don't really notice because they're everywhere, kind of like pigeons, or, it's like you don't really pay attention to them, but God sees everyone. God pays attention to every one of those little birds. And I think that's so beautiful. And also, there were a lot of laws in the Old Testament, Jewish laws about how to treat an animal. And, there were very specific laws about livestock, pardon me. So for example, you shouldn't muzzle the ox while he's treading grain, right? Because that made it very difficult for him. So it's like, if you're going to set up your ox to tread grain, just be sure that his muzzle is not on him so he can have more movement of his head and that doesn't harm him. So there were laws that protected animals in the Old Testament. So certainly there's a lot of Bible verses about how God heals the woundedness in humanity, how God heals the brokenhearted. He's near to the brokenhearted, the Bible says. And there's a beautiful picture of how God will restore humanity to himself and how our suffering matters to him so deeply. But there are also lots of passages that talk about the restoration of the natural world and the restoration of animals. And you see that in some of the apocalyptic books, such as Revelation. Towards the end of Revelation, there's this beautiful picture of the wolf lying down with a lamb in the grass and just being there together, like a cat and a dog in a house, that have been raised together. Like there's no fear. One is not trying to eat the other one. They're totally at peace with each other. And that's the picture of the natural world. So God did not design the natural world to be as it is now in terms of its brokenness. And we see shadows of him in a lot of the beauty and the majesty and the power of the natural world. But there's a level of brokenness that's there. And it's there because of sin and rebellion, such as predation, right? Animals eating each other. And so even looking back into dinosaurs, the time of dinosaurs, I mean, you see arthritis in the bones of T-Rex. If you're finding arthritis in these bones, it's like, wow. So yeah, I mean, God, that was certainly not God's plan for there to be suffering in this world for humans or for animals. Yeah. Did I answer your question? I'm not even sure.
Yes, you answer me, and I think that regardless of the claims that are made against God, if animals are God's creation, God also loved them, and these animals are under His care.
I was just going to say there's a level of responsibility there too. Like for Christians, we are held responsible for how we treat the natural world and for how we treat animals. There's a proverb that says like the kind-hearted man takes a good care of his animals, but the wicked man mistreats his animals. And so there's like almost like a level of judgment that we will have to answer for how we've treated them. So there are some people who are like, oh, Christians think they can do whatever they want with the natural world because God gave it to them, like, to do whatever they want with. And that's not it at all. The Bible says the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. So all the animals are his possession. His possession. We just have the blessing of being able to live with them and sometimes care for them. So yeah, I would probably have to
Yeah.
add that to the answer.
Now let's talk about an interesting topic, that is miracles. And I think this is a common question for a Christian scientist, because people think that if you are a man or a woman of science, you cannot believe in miracles. On my page, I post a blog about the historical Jesus. Some people comment on this and talk about the impossibility of the resurrection of Jesus because it's just science. And so this is a common question from the atheist side, the non-believer side. Are miracles possible? And if it's true, how can you reconcile the science and miracles?
Yeah. I think, well, it's a wonderful question. And I've actually just gone back and reread a lot of the writings of David Hume on this, because he was very scientifically minded and he did not believe that miracles were possible. So I think for me, one of the things that I have found really encouraging is that I believe that miracles are supernatural, not anti-natural. So miracles don't go against nature. They never go against the natural process. They work within nature, right? So God is working within the forces and the medium that he has created to reveal himself, to manifest himself in beautiful ways. And I'm not the kind of person who, like, every time a baby is born, I'm like, oh, it's a miracle. No, it's not a miracle. It's just a normal biological process, right? Like a guy and a girl got together and you get a baby and, like, okay, everybody knows how it works, right? So, it's beautiful, but it's not a miracle. So a true miracle, is a supernatural thing where God intervenes within his natural process to reveal himself. So case in point from the Bible, let's think about the conception of Christ. Christians believe that Christ was conceived by a virgin. That normally does not happen naturally, right? So that is either supernatural or anti-natural, not sure yet. Now, when we're reading the account in the book of Luke, it specifically says in the narrative that 9 months later, Mary gave birth to a boy, and they named him Jesus. And I find that very significant because it naturally takes a woman 9 months, right? Her gestation period is 9 months before she's ready to deliver the baby. So we see again how God is working inside of nature to reveal himself and to bring about his own purposes. So it's not anti-natural, but it is supernatural, meaning it is within and above nature. God is working inside of nature, but he's also outside of it. God's working inside of time, but he's also outside of it, not segregated from it, but more than, right? His boundaries go so far outside of it. So I do believe in miracles, and I have experienced miracles in my life in really profound ways. And they were never ways in which God was, like, making a unicorn come out of the sky or something crazy, just for fun. It was always, he was revealing himself in a way that brought people back to his heart, in a way that saved people. So yeah, I do believe in miracles, and I do think that they don't go against science at all. Science describes what's happening around us. And yeah, there was something else I was going to say about that, but I forgot. Sorry, Andres.
Don't worry about it. It was good. I was remembering a little bit when we were talking about God's creation. I remember Richard Dawkins, who said that nature has the appearance of design, but in reality, it is not design. And this is a quote that it is commonly seen on the internet. Many atheists use this quote. What do you think about it? Is this really true?
Well, I think, to their point, I mean, to be fair, sometimes there are things that look one way that are actually a different way. Um, you think about, a light particle and how people used to think that light was corpuscular. It was sort of like particulate, right? And you could separate it through a prism and get it to separate into like a rainbow, all of its different colors, and that kind of proved that it was sort of like a particle. But then you get the wave experiments that show that it actually behaves like a wave. So then it's like, well, it's both. So we're not sure. It kind of looks like a particle, but it's actually a wave. So a lot of times there are things in science, especially like quantum physics, that look one way, that are in truth another way. The issue with applying this to design is there's really no other answer. I mean, it looks designed, so we have to come up with something else that shows conclusively that it isn't designed, right? If I look out at the sky and I say, wow, the sky is blue, and you say to me, well, Xandra, the sky looks blue, but it's actually not blue, it's actually green, then I would want to pursue that with you, right? I would say, oh, is that right? Okay, well, that's very interesting. So maybe there's something wrong with my eye, right? Or maybe you can see more colors than other people can. Like, I would want to understand what the deal is. The issue, though, is that literally everyone on this planet looks at the sky and says blue, period. So it's on you to convince them out of that, right? Because you're kind of like, we would say the burden of proof. The burden of proof is on you to explain why the sky is truly green. And we're living in this world. You can walk into a park. You can reach up into a tree and pick a leaf down. And you can look at that leaf and you can look at the beauty, the symmetry, just the incredible complexity of just a leaf, and you can hold it up to the sun and see the design, the pattern inside of it, and everything around us. It does look designed. Overwhelmingly, it looks designed. And everyone on earth, when they're a kid, asks, who made this, basically, right? Who made the dinosaurs, or because it looks made. So I would say, the burden of proof would be on someone who says, well, it isn't made, but it looks that way. And going back to the light example, we had scientific evidence to point us in different directions, but this is kind of more like, we'll throw in, one of the things I don't like about macroevolution is it's the only scientific theory that's really been pitted against the existence of God over and over and over again as a tool to try and like push him out, or like push out the need for him. And it isn't always employed properly, purely as scientific theory. And I think it's often used improperly. So yeah, the earth looks designed, and if it isn't, I'm going to need a lot of evidence to convince me otherwise, basically.
Yes, this is often used to attack God's design. Another topic I find interesting is natural evil. We see a lot of this around us, all around the world. There are earthquakes, tsunamis, hurricanes, all these natural disasters. This is commonly referred to as natural evil. So there are people who ask the question, where is God in the midst of these disasters? Did God design the world to be like this? Why does this keep happening? How would you respond to natural evil?
That is really, truly a great question. I appreciate that question, Andres. Honestly, I would have to, well, if I could, I'll try to be brief, but if I could give 3 different Christian responses to this from the 3 different Christian camps that have to do with creation, right? Because you're talking about God, his creation of the natural order, and then this sort of natural evil. And how did he make that, or did it happen? How did that happen? So the 3 most common views of creation are, first of all, young earth creationism, which believes that God created the earth in literally 7 days. And So they would say that there was no natural evil before the fall of Adam, right? So when they were living in the garden, everything was at peace. The entire globe, the entire natural order was at total peace, total harmony. And after Adam sinned, that sin broke the natural order in that moment. And that's when we get earthquakes and, I don't know, volcanoes and all of these things. So that's one view. The second view is called old earth creationism. And old earth creationism believes that the earth is as old as it looks, but it does not believe in macroevolution. It thinks that God made what we see through his own creative process. He's through, as the Bible explains it, like he spoke and it came into being, right? Ex nihilo. It doesn't believe that God sort of created evolution and that just let it go. So this view would say that natural evil actually happened before Adam, way even before Adam existed, which is philosophically kind of tricky, right? Because it says, God created the earth in these long periods of time, like millions of years, and long before humans were on the scene, long before Adam and Eve were created, we had dinosaurs and things like that were eating each other and attacking each other, and we had volcanoes and earthquakes and floods. So there was that's what's called the problem of PAP, the problem of pre-Adamic pain and suffering, pre-Adamic, like before Adam. How do we explain that? Well, a lot of people believe, that the earth was created unfallen, but that someone fell before Adam. That someone being, who was the first person to fall from heaven? Who was the first person to sin against God?
Satan.
Yes. So this is, there's not a lot of biblical basis for this. So this is a common view that Satan, when he fell, when he rebelled against God, that had a tangible effect on creation. That rebellion invited in a sin and a brokenness into creation. And which is why the language that's used in Genesis later often uses increase, or for example, when God is speaking to Eve after they have sinned, he says, Eve, your pain will increase in childbirth, which makes it sound like she would have been in pain in childbirth before. And also how they were in a garden. God planted a garden on the face of the earth, a paradise on the earth. And when you think about a garden, you think it's different inside the garden from what's outside, right? The garden is somewhere that's cultivated. Everything there is in order, and on the outside is like wilderness, right? So some people believe God planted this garden, he put Adam and Eve in it, and he gave them this mandate to go out and spread and multiply across the world, and that process was going to sort of like basically spread Eden across the entire globe and bring it back into the harmony that it was in before. Now they fell, and what happens to them? They're cast out of Eden, right? So they're out into that broken world. So that's another view of that the earth was sort of broken even before Adam and Eve. And then the third and the final view is theistic evolution, which I've mentioned before. And this view would say that his creation is good but groaning. It's good, but it seems like it's in pain, right? So we look at things like tectonic plates, the natural mineral cycles, naturally occurring volcanism on this planet. All of these things are just part of how our Earth was designed physically as a planet, with how the composition of our Earth's core and how that's going to affect the crust, the gravitation of our planet, and all these things. And it's actually a beautiful cycle. It's kind of like the rain cycle, but we have this cycle of like minerals in the ground and all these other things that are happening naturally, which is really cool. And they would say, this can be destructive to people. If you build, your house on top of a volcano, it's probably going to get blown away at some point. But that's not because the volcano is evil. That's because you made a mistake. So they would say a lot of things that are called natural evil are just natural processes that we would sort of get in the way of. And there are some philosophical problems with that, we could agree, some major philosophical problems. So those are the three basic responses to the question, and there are strong points and weak points in each of those three views. But I would encourage everyone to look into that on their own, read the Bible, do some research, and yeah, it's good to wrestle with that question.
Thank you so much for your answer, Xandra. It was very detailed. And yeah, I think your answer will vary depending on your interpretation of creation. And well, the time here in the program has gone very fast. Once again, I want to thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure to share with you all the answers you gave and your approach, because of your expertise in your field, is very important for people who might be struggling with these kind of questions. And yeah, maybe some people think that these questions might be basic, but I think that there's a lot of people struggling with these basic questions. So thank you so much for being here. And why don't you say a few words to encourage people who want to study science, but they fear that there might be a conflict between their faith and their career? What would you say to these young people?
Yeah. I would just encourage them, and I would say thank you. First of all, thank you for their boldness to be willing to go into a place that is not easy to go as a Christian. It takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of faith to do that. And it can be intimidating and it can be hard. But you know, as Christians, wherever we end up, we are going to struggle because of our belief in Jesus. Jesus said, you know, the world hates you just as it's hated me, because you aren't of the world anymore. It's like you're a new creation. It's like you're a foreigner, like you're a foreign traveler who's in a land, a country that's different from your own. Even maybe you were born here, you speak the language, these are your people, but in your spirit, in your heart, you're no longer a citizen of that place. You're a citizen of heaven. And so that it does feel isolating, but Jesus says, I will not leave you as orphans. I will come to you. And that's a beautiful promise. And whenever I feel sad or alone or persecuted because of my faith, I ask him, please come to me, Jesus, and help me. And, you know, he sends his Holy Spirit to help us and to encourage us. And whatever you are facing, whatever struggles you are facing, your God is bigger than those struggles. And it's just important for all of us to remember to invite him into that with us. And then in terms of the science specifically, you know, he's a God who loves to reveal hidden things to us. He loves to reveal things to us. He loves discovery. He encourages us to go out and learn and be curious and increase in our knowledge and our understanding, because it's kind of like a form of worship, right? We're worshiping him with our minds. So there are people out there who will tell you that you are stupid if you're Christian, you are unintelligent if you're a Christian, and your mind doesn't work, your mind is broken if you believe in God. And that's not true at all. God is offering your mind an expansion, right? Because you can go beyond just what you can see with your eyes and hear with your ears. Faith allows us to have knowledge and understanding that goes beyond that. So I would encourage people, don't give up, don't lose heart. God loves you. God is for you. He's on your side. You're on his team. And if you're ever really needing help, reach out to someone and pray, because the power of prayer is real. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Xandra. That will be helpful to many people around here. Well, folks, if you want to know more about Xandra, she has an apologetics ministry. And you can go down in the comment section and see her page. And it will be a pleasure to have you back here and be able to talk about other topics, Xandra.
Thank you for what you're doing, Andres. I appreciate all your work.
Thanks to you, Xandra, y gracias a cada uno de ustedes, amigos, que constantemente están apoyando el contenido de esta página. Ya nos estaremos volviendo a ver pronto con otra entrevista. Así que hasta luego.